Hey there, I am back with another deck review, and today we're going to be looking at the Carbon deck from Elemental Playing Cards. This deck was released on Kickstarter and is the third deck from designer Nick Nisco and Elemental Playing Cards. All of the decks go after the periodic table of elements. Each one of them kind of pays homage to a different element. The first two decks in the series were here. You got the hydrogen deck that came first, and then that was followed up with oxygen. You can see the very nice continuity in the style across all of them. So bits that make them all unique, but they all kind of have a visual continuity that's really cool. But he followed up hydrogen and oxygen with something a little bit different with carbon. I decided to do a pair of decks, and so he teamed up with Luke Wadey. Now, Luke Wadey has done a lot of cardistry style decks, things like Mono or the Arrow decks, if you're familiar with those. Great graphic designer. And for this one, they really played off the idea that carbon, the element featured here, is what's called an allotrope. An allotrope is basically an element that can exist in multiple forms, and carbon really shows its diversity, existing as either diamond form or graphite form. It's a really big contrast because diamonds are these incredibly rare and valuable gems, some of the hardest elements or hardest minerals on the entire earth. Meanwhile, graphite, relatively common, very soft element. And so it's an interesting play. And so Nick and Luke decided to each design a deck. Nick designed the diamond edition, Luke designed the graphite edition, and they really wanted to celebrate some of that contrast. So let's take a look at the two decks and see how they did with their collaboration. Now we're going to start out with Nick's deck, the diamond edition. It's done on a regular glossy finish tuck case. Very, relatively plain in terms of the materials, no embossing, no foiling of any sort. And it just features a very simple design. Circular design in the center, the chemical symbol C for carbon right there in the middle, carbon written underneath. Of course, it's labeled as the diamond edition. And then it just has this large ring that wraps around to the sides of the tuck. This ring is made up of little, kind of a myriad of shards and shapes meant to mimic the facets of a diamond all the way around. Really cool monochromatic scene, all done in just shades of gray, but it still produces a really dazzling effect overall. As you turn to the sides, you get just a small carbon atom reflected there at the top. And then on the bottom, you get a little bit of ad copy for Nick and Luke, as well as USPCC, who printed the deck. The top just says carbon. And then the back here is going to be not the back design of the cards, but it's meant to look like one of the tiles from the periodic table of elements. So you have the sort of silver gray border around, and then the element carbon reflected there in the center. Even includes the atomic number and atomic weight on there as well, just like you'd find on the periodic table. And in keeping with the scientific accuracies that you'll find throughout the deck and the nice little touches, this is a cool one. If you remember chemistry class, maybe you remember stuff about the orbital configuration of electrons. So the electrons around any given atom, they fall into these different clouds, basically. I'm not going to go into all the detail of it, but this is the notation that shows you the exact orbital configuration of carbon right there. So pretty cool touch. As you open up the inner flap, you have a little quote here about a diamond. So it just says, "Be a diamond, flourish under pressure." Great quote from Maureen Joyce Connolly. And nothing printed on the interior of the tuck. So relatively simple tuck, but really well done, especially with that monochromatic color scheme. I think it's a great tuck case. Now getting into the cards, and we'll start with the back design. Here it is, and it's an impressive back design. A lot going on and really playing off of that diamond theme with shards going all the way around. It's all done in just grayscale colors, blacks, whites, and grays. And the central element is this large circular diamond in the middle. Lots of different facets cut into the center. And then it just says diamond edition and a rim around the edges. More of those shards filling in all the empty space all the way around. And then the only other words you'll see is just the little carbon square here at the top and bottom. Finishes out in that white poker border, nice and thin, with that two-way back design. Now, also of note on this edition, this is actually a marked deck. Now, I'm not going to get into the exact marking system other than to say it's marked up here in this corner and in this corner. So if you buy one of these decks, he'll send you a PDF that explains the entire marking system. I will say I'm impressed. I don't go a lot into marking systems, but it's a relatively hard to detect marking system that's also really easy to read once you get used to it. So I like the marking system that's done in this one. I think it's a really well done one. That said, I'm not a magician, so don't take my word for it. Maybe it's a terrible one. I think it's a great one. But that's it. That is the back design of the cards. Now into the cards themselves, and we'll start with the 3 extra cards. And here you get a trio of images, all of just a simple hand, and they all tell kind of an interesting story with them as well. Really well done, kind of an inked sketch here in the middle. So the first one features graphite here, so you can see the hand clutching the carbon in graphite form in the middle. And then as you go to the next one, you can see pressure, and so that hand is clenched up into a fist. And if you apply pressure to carbon for long enough and hard enough, you will get a diamond. So the diamond is the 3rd joker. This time you can see an enormous cut diamond right there in the center of the hand. They all just say Joker, Joker in the corner, but fun, simple, but still really functional jokers. I really like these. So there are your 3 jokers. You also get a double backer, and the double backer has the diamond back on one side, and then on the other side, just a small preview. We'll look more in detail at this in a second, but this is the back design for the graphite deck. So kind of a double backer with a flip, so you can see both versions in there. We'll look more at that, like I said, in a little bit. All right, on to the rest of the deck. Starting with the ace of spades. And again, this is sort of keeping with a lot of the designs on some of the previous versions. It's relatively simple. Has a large spade pip in the background on the ace of spades. Features an overlay of the carbon atom right there in the center. So you can see the nucleus and the electrons floating around it. The 6 over there representing the atomic number of carbon. And a little bit more carbon detail down here. Carbon along with its atomic mass and the elemental logo underneath. So there's the ace of spades. Most of the number cards, or all of the number cards I should say, are pretty much standard. This is meant to be a really functional deck, maybe one you'd use for Magic with that marked back. And so he stayed really standard with all of the number cards. Pips are pretty much what you'd expect, nothing too special. Blacks are black, reds are red, including all the other aces, so only that one power ace of spades. So not too much to say about the number cards. And then we get into the quartz. And the quartz are relatively close to bicycle standards as well. They're all, of course, recolored in black and white. So you get that black, white, little bit of silver in there, kind of making an appearance and giving it a really kind of much more grayscale feel to it overall. But as you look at the quartz, you'll see some extra details in the clothes, just as a nod to the diamonds. You'll see extra little shards like here in the center, little facets cut in there just to add that diamond feel to it overall. You get a nice 9 of diamonds reveal there on the queen of spades too. If you flip through the rest of the numbers, or the court cards rather, you'll see more diamonds making an appearance. You get a few circular diamonds there, but nice simple touches overall. Nothing too out there, still keeps it a really super functional deck. Very familiar, easy to use deck, but still feels nicely custom as well. I will say I like how that grayscale court against that red looks. I think it really, somehow the grayscale pops out just because of the contrast with that red. So there are your number cards. Now, before we get into last thoughts about the deck and handling, let's take a second to look at the second version of the deck. And this is Luke Wadey's contribution. This is the Graphite edition. Graphite is pretty much the opposite of the Diamond edition, where Diamond is light, Graphite is dark. Now, Graphite is usually used, or you'll usually find it in pencils. So the whole tuck is given this feel of pencil sketch all the way through, complete with smudges all the way around. So you have the same basic elements. You have C, carbon, Graphite edition this time, but the ring this time is made up of kind of a smudged pencil feel to it overall. You'll see on the sides the elemental and the Luke Wadey icons forming that EL, but just a kind of grayscale feel to it all the way around. The periodic table of elements tile on the back gets that same smudge treatment, nice all the way around. But same basic elements other than the color swap. All of the text and elements around it are pretty much the same, right down to the tuck seal. Interestingly, this one, even though both decks are limited edition, This is the only one that's actually numbered. So this one's numbered out of the 2500 deck edition. The quote on the inside is changed up to fit the graphite theme this time. It says, "What really matters in pencil is not its wooden exterior, but the graphite inside. So always pay attention to what is happening inside of you," from Paulo Coelho. So very nice quote. I like that one quite a bit. I got to remember that one. Again, nothing printed on the interior of the tut case. Now, this is a deck that is, I'm going to call it the same, but incredibly different along the way. So the back design is a complete revision, I gotta say. And here it is. So this is done more in a cardistry style. It's a one-way back design, features a really rough and raw feel to it overall, almost like it was just sketched or stamped on the paper. You have that hexagonal shape in the center with shades of gray, and then lots of different extra bits of writing. You can see the Wadey and Elemental collaboration, given a nod there. You have graphite, carbon, a little bit of part of carbon written over there. You even get the 1.20107, the atomic, or 12.0107, atomic weight of carbon kind of cut off there on the side as well. It's done with a completely borderless design, which gives it some nice extra elements if you use this in fans. But like I said, one-way design, beautifully done. I love the contrast. I mean, when you put these two up together, it's amazing the amount of contrast they're able to get between the two decks. Now, going into the rest of the deck, a lot of the same elements on them overall, but they're given a much rawer treatment and more of a pencil sketch treatment. So you get the same three Jokers, but this time they look a little bit more like they're the initial sketch of the Jokers. They even get extra little pencil marks and swirls around it to give it sort of an imperfect feel to it overall. There's your double backer, so the diamond on one side and graphite on the other. And then all the rest of the cards, the Ace of Spades and the number cards, very much the same, but given again that smudged look, almost as if somebody just came through with their finger and smudged over all the cards. Extra elements here on the side, again printed all the way to the edges, which give you nice fan effects. And you get extra random things on, some of the different cards, like there's carbon stamped on one of them, graphite edition. I love the randomness of this. I love the faded look of the pips. Really nice contrast to the first deck. So very imperfect feel to them overall, but still pretty easily readable if you wanted to use these for gameplay or anything like that. So flipping really quickly through the number cards, other than the random stampings on them, they're basically standard quartz or standard number cards, just with smudges and extra bits added to them. So there are your number cards, and then we get into the quartz. The quartz are not just smudged versions of the ones that we saw in Diamond. They're actually changed up. So you don't see the diamonds on these anymore. You see more of a black and white standard quart that's been completely smudged over to where like parts of it are completely faded out. But beautiful design to these. I think it's just a great effect with that smudging. And if you pay close attention, you'll see a little pencil. Obviously pencils use graphite. So there's a little pencil behind the ear of the Jack, or a pencil right there in the Queen of Spades hands. So a nice extra little touch. So there's a hidden pencil in each one of these. Usually it's behind the quartz ear. The red quartz do add little splashes of red, again smudged up, but you do get some red in the clothes, so it's not a pure grayscale. It's kind of a striking splash of color after looking at so much black and white. And then into the clubs and finishing out with the hearts. And that's it. Now, as far as handling, both of these are printed on a nice crushed stock from USPCC, and they handle great. And in particular, of course, with the cardistry feel to it, the graphite deck looks great in fans. You get those edge elements that really just show up great if you can get a nice smooth fan out of them. So these handle well, they fan smoothly, dribbles, springs, all that. Just a great feeling deck overall. Now, what would I use this deck for, and what do we think of it overall? Well, I think that's one of the fascinating things about it. I think, despite it being a collaboration, they really were able to create so much contrast between these different designs, and that extends to the functionality as well. Whereas the Diamond deck with that marked back and fairly standard look to it overall, I think this would be a great gameplay and magic deck, really first and foremost. Whereas the Luke Wadey Graphite edition really is geared towards cardistry with one-way backs, a lot more customization and smudges and imperfections on them. You know, a little harder to read if you wanted to use it for gameplay, but still, I think functional enough for gameplay. But really, cardistry is going to be where this one is at. These are both, though, decks that were meant to be used, are outstanding at their purpose. So I think just a fantastic collaboration. And I got to say, this has got to be the best example of a collaboration that I can recall. I love the contrast they were able to create while still staying true to the carbon theme. They're decks that feel like they belong together and yet at the same time go after completely different angles and different takes. So really well done with Elemental playing cards, Nick Nisco and Luke Wadey. I can't say enough about this deck. So incredibly glad that I backed this one. And if you're looking at getting these yourself, one other thing I'll recommend you checking out. This is a great touch that Nick has started adding to some of his campaigns, and that's the custom carrot cases. So he worked with Carrot Case Creations to create these really cool carrot cases. And what you get to do is with those ring elements here, you can basically put multiple of the decks together. So here I've got carbon dioxide. So you've got carbon in the center with oxygen on either side. And the case itself is engraved on the inside, so you get a little bit of a textured engraving there, which kind of gives you those rings, so you get that feel, and then it mirrors perfectly as you put it over the cards themselves. Really cool touch. I have this CO2. There's also an H2O version that you can use with the hydrogen and oxygen ones. I really like this touch, and for the science geek in me, this is a really fun one. So that's it. That is the look at the carbon decks from Elemental Playing Cards and Luke Wadey. Big fan. I'll put a link down in the description where you can go check these out for yourself. Go pick one up on Elemental's website. Can't say enough about them. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this look at carbon. Make sure to subscribe for more deck reviews and unboxings. Let me know what else you want to see, and I'll see you for the next one.